Muy bien. All right, here we are again on a Friday with the Wisdom Factory community meeting, hangout on air with myself, Mark, and William.
I think normally I'm Heidi, but you can also call me Adelheid.
Adelheid. Okay. We have a relationship. Yeah. And anyway, we try to be here every Friday for these talks, and we're moving forward from what we've been talking about for the past few weeks, which was levels of development, and we're going to look tonight at lines of development. And as usual, I took a very different approach to the topic than she did. You know, I was going to be kind of exhaustive, and I found all of these, umpty three lines of development, and that vary according to who you're talking to. And and she said, no, we're not going to do that. She said, you want to talk about.
I want to talk about what we did just now with Scott. Hello, Scott.
Hello there. Hi, everybody.
Oh, yeah. Okay. All right.
Because we had just a transmission of the Fun and Relaxation Challenge in our show, which I do with Margarita Crystal Lotus, which is called Hangout on Connections. And we have fun and relaxation, yes, by creativity. And I thought this would be a wonderful line to talk about in this occasion and to fill it with life, because we have had the experience just now, and we can also share in the chat the URL of this. I cannot bring it up here, but I could. But afterwards on YouTube, I could put it in annotations, because we really were creative, weren't we, Scott?
Oh yeah, it was it was so much fun.
So talking about the lines of development, Ken Wilber says, and not only him, that we have several
levels of development.
Lines today.
You're talking about, I know. Okay.
Did I say levels?
No. I was going to say something different, but true. Yeah,
okay. We have several lines, many lines, but you can group them in let's say, a group of 10 or 15, you know. And one of them, for instance, would be, I think at least, creativity. It would be music, would be art included there. I don't know how you see that. The other levels are the cognitive line and the mathematical, logical line, and the oh, Naira is coming. Wonderful.
Yeah, that's great. Hello, Naira.
Hopefully the microphone is working.
I hope your microphone, yes, is working. We'd love to hear you.
So, and the moral line, the spiritual line, the emotional line.
Yeah.
What else did you find?
The moral line, the spiritual line, the interpersonal line, the aesthetic line, which might include all kinds of arts, the psychosexual line. I want to know more about that one. What's that about, anyway? And, kinesthetic, all kinds of things.
So we could today talk about the kinesthetic line. Oh, there is, Scott, you have brought up something. Let me see.
Yeah, this is the spectrum of consciousness. Oh, I'm getting a little feedback.
Okay, we have to put in the earphones. You talk a minute and we mute our...
Sure. Okay, so here we have what you guys were talking about in a handy chart. And as you can see along the bottom are just some lines of development here. We have the faith line of development, morals, values, orders of consciousness, self-identity, cognition. So it's really arbitrary, sort of, to talk about a particular aspect of your being that develops. But this comes from Howard Gardner, which Ken Wilber adapted into what is known as your spectrum of consciousness, or your psychograph, as it's known. And you have a kind of a center of gravity. So your lines, maybe one line you're high in, maybe morals, but you're low in self-identity. So one of these lines could be higher than the other, and it's not, you know, important to evolve every line of development, but it's important to know about them. And where we're talking about creativity, which is not on this graph, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think we cannot even develop all these lines because we have a finite life. But I think as possibility, we have them all. Humans have all these, and then it depends a little bit where you came in touch with, and how your abilities were. How do you say? Fostered by your surroundings,
Right.
and then also a little bit about being gifted. But I think our society is too much overvaluing the gifted thing, because when they say to me, "Oh, you are gifted for singing," you know, I'm not really. When I was 15 or something, I sang like everybody else, and then I did the famous 10,000 hours. Probably, I guess, and that's how you become a sort of master in what you are doing. But as I said, life is finite. We cannot do everything 10,000 hours, you know. So we have a inclination to develop certain lines a little better. I mean, some people like to study libri here. I'm in Italian now. Books, and they don't care for music, or they don't care for vegetable growing or whatever, you know. And it's fine. Right. But potentially we could learn everything. We have such a huge potential, which we never even know.
We're Renaissance people.
What does that mean?
Well, they were famous for learning, you know, in many different fields of endeavor, for being very artistic, for writing music, for being poets, for being scientists, for doing this research, for being civic-minded people, you know, active in politics, and just very, very well-rounded and curious about everything. And then something happened, and with Orange development, we started to classify everything, get all these taxonomies going, and so people tended to specialize in certain things.
Yeah.
You know?
Also because the knowledge became so big that you couldn't know everything anymore. Because there was a time in which you could know everything, which was known on Earth. But this is far gone. Yeah, no, what was available. They really could learn it in a lifetime, and we can't. So that was sort of logical, I think, that specialization came on. But still, I mean, today we say some people are too much specialized because they have a narrow mind and see only one thing and they know everything about this thing. I think we need that in some way. But it is sort of reducing our being.
The trouble is that they can't speak to other people
because,
outside their field.
Yeah, because they are so specialized.
Or they don't anyway.
Yeah. Often scientists are, not always. Now I want to come back to Scott, because Scott, for me, you are sort of a, how do you say, a follower of the Renaissance. First of all, it was in the beginning of the 20th century, where there was this revival of art as a complexive, we can say holistic or integrated thing, you know, when art was not only music or not only writing or not only painting or something. Poetry. There was the tendency, architects, for instance, there was also musicians and painters and whatever, the tendency to reunite at least the creative part, you know?
Yeah.
And you, for me, are a little bit like this, because you are doing many things.
Well,
Go ahead.
To add on to what you're saying, I think that creativity in and of itself is kind of like an energy or motivation that really expresses itself through every person. You don't have to be an artist to be creative. It's just in artists, I think that there is, or artists or musicians or sculptors or graphic designers or dancers, they all are tapping into that energy in a different facet or a different way of expressing itself. And I think the nuance difference between the arts informs each of the other arts. For example, if you do a lot of painting, it's going to inform your music. If you do a lot of dancing, it's going to inform your writing. Somehow there's a cross-pollination, or a way in which the inspiration transmits itself between the creative fields. So it's really fascinating, and that's why, artists kind of suffer individually, because they may compare themselves to other artists out there, and that's not the point. It's you're as an artist, you're getting out of that tortured paradigm and into a different paradigm, which I think is more available nowadays, with more of a healthier approach to the self, and less self-destructive, and because the whole tortured artist is a very big cosmic groove, you could call it, or a very easy trap or a pitfall for artists to fall into.
Yeah, that was especially began with Romanticism, no?
Yeah.
And they were all suffering for the art.
Tragic
Right.
romance.
For about 150 years of
Opera. I die for. Oh God. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, that's wonderful.
What I wanted to say in this connection, it is known that many mathematic people who have a gift in mathematics are also musicians. And many doctors. In Germany, there are several orchestras of medical doctors.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So,
That's a strange combination.
no, it's not strange, but it's what Scott says. This is the cross-pollination.
Mhm.
When you are only in one field, you get sort of crazy. You are so, I don't know what you call that, when a horse goes like this.
Blinders.
You're
Blinders.
It's blinders.
blindness, yeah. And you need something else to remain human. Otherwise, you become a machine in your field.
Well, that explains why I'm that way.
Come on.
Well,
I want to acknowledge there's Naira. No, she's gone again.
gone
She-
again.
She,
Thank
seems to
goodness.
have problems with. I'm sorry for that.
yeah.
Technology.
Too bad. Well,
Yeah.
ah,
Yeah, and Einstein was a musician too, and
yeah.
physicists often are.
Yeah.
And I think this is a healthy way also to combine the both hemispheres, the both activities.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
today we started out with creativity, but we can go to any other line.
Mhm.
It
Well-
seems that, for instance, science and music seem to be lines which are helping each other to grow.
Mhm. I'm not. Can we find other pairs like that? This is kind of a new idea for me, finding these pairs. Though our friend Lawrence has been talking about that to some degree. Yeah. I don't know.
What do you mean?
Oh, he's finding pairs. He was talking specifically about levels of development and finding pairs of. I cannot say anymore because he just mentioned it, but it's ringing the bell. Sorry, can't pursue this.
You are talking in enigma. I don't understand.
I don't understand me either.
Okay.
I don't know. All right. Okay. So.
Okay, so let's start out and continue with the creativity part. And music, there is Jeremy who says Renaissance Man isn't just a movie. There are some Renaissance people left, but not as many as I'd like to see. Multidisciplinary, well-rounded folks with many interests. Woohoo! I'm on, Jeremy. I really have so many interests that I don't know where to put. And that's why my days they end so quickly, because
Right.
Do that, do that, do that, do that, and boom.
Yeah.
Well, living out here in the country has certainly expanded my activities, if not my interest. That's for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
And I guess, Jeremy, you are too. You have shown that you are a pianist
mhm,
and you compose your songs.
mhm.
And probably you have also a day job, I guess. And what else would you like to tell us? What you are up to? What are your interests? What are your passions? And how you combine them?
Are you asking Jeremy to come into the green
I
room?
did, but he
Mhm.
didn't come.
He
So
didn't.
maybe he has the same problem as yesterday with the computer.
I
So
don't know. Okay.
So-
Mhm.
let's ask Scott about the connection of these different streams in his life.
Yeah, I think we were talking a little bit earlier about how the different lines of development affect other lines in your own individual self. So if you find yourself interested in music and you develop musically, say you're a pianist, that might also impact how you relate to others. So your social line of development or your interpersonal skills can be informed by a different line that's very active or very, you could say, more evolved than one line can help. Somehow it informs even in yourself. So that's why in integral life practice, you'll want to actually look at your lines because there's aspects of your actual individual self that can be more evolved or enhanced because of the other parts of you. And so I think that's fascinating too, that somehow weightlifting can affect your cognitive development or your spiritual development. Or in my case, running, I like to go jog outside. There's a aspect of that somehow gives me informs me spiritually. I have sometimes spiritual experiences when I jog, where I just feel everything kind of melt, and it's like just a bodily type thing, but you get into a flow state or something like this. This is what I mean by how different aspects of yourself can even cross pollinate there in your own being, even in your own self.
Mhm. Well, Ken, of course, has been famous in promoting weightlifting
Right.
as very conducive to development,
Right.
and it certainly worked in his case, didn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I do know what you mean by the flow state because that can happen to me riding the bike, uh, especially if there's nothing really to look at the moment. I'm just pumping, just pumping, just pumping, pedaling, pedaling, pedaling. Oh, go places I could never have planned to go. That's
Yeah.
great. Hmm. Hmm.
I would like to come back to this music line development, which can create social, can foster the social line.
Mm.
I think there is a difference between, for instance, when you study piano, which is only you are self-sufficient with the piano,
Mm.
or if you study or singing or a melody instrument where you always need somebody else to, not always, but normally somebody else to make music with, because
Right.
otherwise you are too alone. Even guitar and singing, you can do it still by yourself, But the
True.
others, for instance, singing, you would like to sing with somebody else in a choir, because singing alone is sort of a little bit boring.
Mhm.
Or having a pianist or a guitarist or somebody else in orchestra to accompany you. So this is much more easy that you go, for instance, in a choir or in an orchestra and are prompted to learn social skills,
Mm. Mhm.
and get better in relationships, because otherwise you wouldn't stay there. You cannot stay there, or it's very difficult, and it impacts your performance.
And if you're with a group of singers, you always have something you can talk to about. with one another.
Yeah,
That's
and then
very social.
the performance depends not only on you and you are in control. No, it depends on everybody. So you have to create a we space and
Right.
little bit transcend your ego desire and become a part of the whole thing. Don't lose yourself, hopefully, but don't be the one person. I mean, the really good performance is if everybody is in the same space and is doing, you know, how can you say that? It's synergic.
Synergetic.
Yeah, and if nobody tries to be, you know, the big boss,
Yeah.
and get their voice out, so that everybody hears only their voice. So this is not a great performance. A great performance where you are filled with joy is if everybody is collaborating in the same dedication and in the same. It comes also into flow state when we are co-creating the thing together, and this for sure is developing social and relational skills.
Well, you know, very primitive societies are very familiar with that phenomenon.
Tell me more.
Well, when they have their communal dances and ceremonies, and everybody has a part to play in that, and it's not a matter of any personal success at that level. It's a matter of the community succeeds when everybody is participating somehow, as they should. You know.
So when we talk about the development of the lines through the levels, that would be that in the lower levels, you have still the community aspect and the co-creation. Then when you enter in red and egocentric, you want to be the boss.
Yep, that's a lot of solo pieces.
So we would fight, and sometimes in opera, I don't know if you have listened to it, sometimes the protagonists fight with a voice with each other. Who is louder?
Some divas are out there, I bet.
Yes, competition in the high seas.
Yeah.
And the real good musicians don't do that. The real good musicians serve the music and don't use the music to get their ego out. And this would be also in Orange then. Again, I am a achiever. I'm a Pavarotti. You know,
individual success, stardom. Yes.
Yeah. I'd like to mention that we're talking a little bit about deep listening too. When a musician is listening, they can listen to themselves, and they're listening in the space with other musicians. So there's a kind of attention there that's uncommon in music, that you're placing an attention, especially in improvisation. I watched there's a video that I saw. I'm into brain science, the neuroscience, and they took a guy who's a jazz piano player, and they put him into a functional MRI machine, which is like, you know, the machine that measures activity in the brain with that loud magnet thing that goes around in it. Anyway, they hooked up a piano in front of him and asked him to play the piano, and they could watch areas of his brain with the activity, and that there was something special going on when he was improvising, when he was in the creative mode, that there were areas of the brain that normally would not show in the average person that were lighting up. For example, I believe he had motor areas of the brain that would light up even though he was laying down in the MRI machine. So there was activity that was based on movement in big ways that wasn't a lot of being expressed a lot. So, you know, there's a lot going on there in correlation with what's going on when someone is being creative and deep listening, even in the activity of their brain.
And in some unexpected ways. So in the example you were using, even though the person wasn't physically active, those parts of the brain were still active. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that there were, I forget which aspect of the brain was alive with energy, with activity, but it was not a typical place. And so
Oh.
scientists were wondering, where does creativity come from? Where does it show up in the brain? Because from that exterior point of view, you're trying to reduce everything to the brain or the mind in the brain kind of a thing. But it's still fascinating to me that there's a lot that's happening in the wiring of a brain that is creating in the moment rather than remembering a song. That there's an aspect of the creativity in the moment that requires more of the brain, that requires more activity in the brain. And so that's why I think it really helps with social peace, so that you're really activating all these aspects of your being just by being creative in the moment. And then that changes how you listen to people, your point of view. It changes your how you respond rather than react. And that happens, I think, in jazz quite a bit.
Oh, it's a very active time for the brain. But we have a note here from Jeremy.
It's still about, I asked him about the many things we are doing now. And he said his dog is recovering from surgery, so he cannot come into the green room. His interests are pretty varied. Music?
Lawyer, running, health and fitness, writing, coaching, drama, philosophy, history. You know, the usual stuff that we all do every day. Yeah. Primarily, I'm a running coach, nutrition consultant, but I'm about to launch life coaching. We'll be teaching an 8-week online course on positivity, writing 3 books, blogging. The flow state does not cross-pollinate, like Scott said. Yeah, the creative energy goes where you practice. Practice makes perfect. Keeping your creative juices going, keeping that creative fire lit is a challenge, but it's very important to creatives to cultivate and develop our creativity. Yeah. I'm not sure what he was contradicting you about, if that's what's going on. The flow state does not cross-pollinate, he says.
Lawrence, you have to switch off the transmission and mute yourself, please.
Oh, Lawrence is coming in.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Well, now we will get clarity on this business, because that's what Lawrence does. Yes.
Thank you, Jeremy. It's pretty varied what you are doing, really, really, really. So you know about that cross-pollination, what Scott was talking about, that doing several things. You know, it is often that when we do so many things and have so many interests, we are not going 100% in depth of it, but maybe we don't need to, because we need some people who do that, but we need also people who have the broader view and can get, how do you say, the connection between these things, can create them and get a broader view of it, and as Scott said, cross-pollinate.
Yeah, I think there can be a way that we fragment or kind of disperse the energy, which it's kind of good to have routines or to make plans where you take your creative juice and you put it, like I think that what Jeremy's saying is you might lose focus, or that the energy might not benefit every particular aspect of the creative pursuit. But in my experience, if you practice one thing, it does have a tendency to affect other things in your life. So that's I think what I was saying. Even if you're really good at one thing, it does, or it can have, if you're open-minded, can have an impact on everything else.
Yeah. In this case, this topic, I would mention the research which Alfred Tomatis has done about the 70s. I think it was in the 70s. For 7 years in Canadian schools, he studied 2 parallel classes with more or less alike students, and in one class every day, instead of a topic of a school material, how do you say that? A school science or whatever it is,
school
Subject.
Scholastic
Okay,
curriculum.
thank you.
Subject, yeah.
They had 1 hour of instrument, musical instrument. So let's say they have 6 days, school days of 5 hours of school every day. So they had only 4 hours normal school and 1 hour instrument every day. So they lost quite a bit, let's say, of traditional normal subject teaching. And at the end, all 7 years, these who have done the instruments were better and far better, significantly better in their school results.
In their scholastic
In the
results.
subjects,
Yeah, in their
you know.
subjects, yes.
And the world still pretends that these studies have never been done.
Oh.
So it's
There's nothing like music to expand you, I don't think.
yeah. So we have Lawrence.
Yeah.
Hello, Lawrence.
Something prompted you to come in and join us today, Lawrence.
Yeah, frustration.
Well, happy to provide that for you if it got you here. Okay.
I'm working on a video instructional thing, and my software is not giving me expected results. I walked away from it. I said, the phone just rang. Never mind this video. I'm going to see who called. And it appeared to have come from you people. So that's
Okay.
why
Well,
I'm
welcome.
Thank
Welcome. Perhaps you have some thoughts about the creative line. We're speaking in Wilberian terms here.
Of lines of development. Yeah.
Okay. Well, creative line. I don't know if that's a line exactly, but in my experience of the creative process, it starts with an intention on which you put your attention.
I've heard this before. Yeah.
Isn't that a funny thing?
Yeah.
And your imagination is fueled by the attention you put on the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
With
Yeah.
creativity, memory is a hazard if it becomes a resource from which to draw because it ends up repeating itself and not being creative. And this is commonly what happens. People are trying to draw from their memory what they know in order to create something. It doesn't work like that. Creation is an emergent.
Which doesn't negate so what you have learned before.
Well, it just depends on the leading edge. People who go to what they know as the means of creativity, no good. But if you're already underway in the creative process, then what we remember surfaces naturally at the appropriate moment where it would fit into the creation.
So what you're saying is that creativity, if we're trying to repeat our ideas of what creativity is and bring that to some new content, we're sabotaging ourselves.
Well, I was referring to, well, that is a form of creativity, what you just named there. I'm thinking in terms of any creative act. So, for instance, when I did that piece called Here-ness is the Awareness of Eternality, okay, and I told you I just sat down and did it. And the reason was that the creation had already occurred in me, and all I was doing was making it tangible. This, in fact, is how Mozart worked.
Exactly. I wanted to say that Mozart and also Bach and many composers worked in this way. They didn't construct the music. I mean, in the early 20th century, there was this period where they constructed music mathematically and things.
Yeah.
But the other way, the normal way, I would say, is having it in mind and bringing. I'm not able to do that. I don't know, Scott, if you are.
I don't know. Visually, for me, sometimes there's an all-at-once-ness to a thing, and then it's trying to make my craft, my handiwork, my craftsmanship match the inner vision, which is sometimes totally takes me on a whole different direction. So the initial download, you could call it, of the creative thing sometimes evolves when you're actually making it. So that's also an experience I've had.
Yeah, me too. I've done a large number of sound works just that way. To be more precise, I own synthesizers.
Uh-huh. Oh, yeah, indeed.
And so I do the creative work. It starts out by programming the synthesizer to create, whoops, let's try that again. Get my camera to stay put.
Yeah, and your mic is also very low.
All right, so where was I? Well, isn't that novel? I must say. It's fooling me.
Mm-hmm. Doesn't want you to be seen.
Could be. So, I program the synthesizer for the kind of responsiveness I want, and at a certain point, the way I put it, a window opens, and I get a creative perception, and my hand's already on the keyboard because I'm making it sound so I can program it. The window opens, I feel it, and I cease programming, and I go through that window, and I fly the piece.
Uh-huh.
And I do it until a natural ending of the piece starts happening. The energy flow starts tapering down. You can hear it in the piece itself, and it's done at a certain point. So while I'm doing the piece, it's as Scott described it, there's an ongoing flow to which I'm attending with great attentiveness. So I'm simultaneously attending to the perception and intending through the playing of the keys.
Mm-hmm.
And there's your four parts. The memory part is the recording on the recording device. That's the memory part. But the imagining part is feeling into the creation and receiving its emergence and then making it tangible. That's how I do it in music. When I do it in writing, the writing is already done in me before I even start. I have a creative impulse. I've got a full intuitive perception, and everything is now just rendering it into words, and then a little bit of tweaking at the end of it. And memory only plays a part in holding the perception that came to me steadily enough that I can make it tangible.
Uh-huh.
I can really relate to that.
Mm-hmm.
And a little bit what we did today with me interpreting the movement of the dances, it's something like that. And I also can relate to what you say, writing. When I'm tempted to, or driven to write a blog post, you know, it's coming out of the, I mean, it's typing sort of itself in the keyboard.
Yeah.
Well,
but somewhere between the vision and the keyboard, you know, things get lost sometimes.
And I don't want to be disturbed by anything, because otherwise I might lose it. So that's what you say, no? You must keep the what is it? The memory in some way, so that you don't forget the initial
Creation.
kick.
I went like this because I was anticipating your saying that when I'm driven to write something, I said, well, I've got to write something about such and such, and I just sit down and start writing without the creation having occurred beforehand. Then it's a downer, because it just ends up being strained and mental, and it has no life to it. But if I set out to write something and I get the creative impulse, let me say it better than that. I get the creative impression. Before I start writing or creating in any other way, I already have the intention fully vivid in me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going for words looking for the intention. I've already got it.
Yeah.
And then I can flow. But the intention has to be in place first. For me.
The intention to write it.
No, the intention of what I want to write.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And you know how I do that is more or less I sleep at night, and then I wake up and think about it, and I sleep again and think about it and sleep again, and in the morning I get up and write it.
There you go.
Yeah, for me, it's for me, there's a kind of quantity. So quality, because like in my past, art has been something that wasn't always in that creative moment. So what I've decided to do is make a practice out of my creative things that I do and show up. And like Lawrence says, for me, it's an intention to show up and do my craft. And whether or not it's good, that's something that comes toward the end of it, because there's an emphasis more on the constant touching into the creative spark, or that eros, or that evolutionary drive that allows for further pushing of your own edge creatively, your own avant-garde edge, and the options that you might have are different if you're just seeking quality. And I've noticed that I produce far less if I just want something good. So that's the focus. Focus changed for me from quality to quantity. And then if it's good, it's good. It's not always good.
For me,
That's
if I
good.
want to do something really good, normally I get sabotaged by myself. So I need to have the other way. I need to have the impulse and the real interest and the focus on that. Or also an emotional arousal, why I want to, you call it intention, why I want to bring it out. And then if it's good, I look later. And sometimes after a while, I read my text and think, oh, it's not bad, But in the moment, I don't know how it is.
Yeah, me too.
Well, there's a saying that perfection is the enemy of the good.
Yeah.
Well, I like to revise that saying. Perfectionism is the enemy of the mediocre.
Okay. Well, that's another way.
I would prefer the first one, because I was a real perfectionist, and only in singing, for instance, I understood when I try to do it perfectly, I'm always tight and I will never get my voice out. And that's why I now teach voice by getting people away from perfectionism, because the perfection comes later. The perfection comes when you are already free, and then you can go for perfection. But when you have it in your mind at the beginning, you are tight and you cannot develop the possibilities you have, the potential. It is always sort of closed and limited. So I'm happy not to be a perfectionist anymore, at least not. Otherwise, I wouldn't do things like today, where we improvised something. I have no idea how my voice comes out, and it doesn't. I don't care. And I was so educated to always, must always be perfect, the breath perfect, and the line perfect, and everything perfect. And otherwise, you have to be ashamed if you are not. And I'm really, really glad that I don't have that anymore, and that I dare to just do what I feel is the right thing to do. And there are sometimes noises and sometimes sounds which are not nice, but they are the correspondence to what I see in the dancer today, for instance. And by the way, this is Maria Callas. She was known, some of her directors, orchestra directors, when they were asked, does she have a beautiful voice? And he said, beautiful? I've never thought about it. She was always right. And Maria Callas, she didn't have the like Teresa Tebaldi, she always wanted to have her voice educated, fine and nice. And Maria Callas gave her voice to the expression of the emotion which was there, which was inside of the piece. So these are two completely different approaches to how to perform.
Like a technical side of the craft, and then the expression side of the craft. Both those, I think, can go together. I like the idea of perfecting, which is different than perfectionism. Perfecting is like a verb, so you're really just endlessly working or processing or aiming your intention at a not so much a goal, but the honing of the skill, and that's not the same thing as the ego has a way, I think, of hijacking. The ego has a way of hijacking the creativity and then sometimes even self-sabotaging or preventing creativity from even coming forward.
Absolutely.
Or even get really burnt out in the opposite. So I do this as one way, but then the burnout is other way.
Yeah, and what I think we need this work when we want to become good, and to really, for instance, with the voice, when your voice is still tight, if it's still not liberated, you want to express something, but you can't.
Right.
Because the voice comes, the limitations come in between, and what comes out of you is not what you wanted to have. So in the case, I know best voice, so I use that. So when you have liberated your voice and you can really do whatever you want to do, and then you give your voice or your instrument or whatever in service to the music, but not the other way around. Many people use the music to get out their brilliancy,
Yeah.
So that's my idea about that. Excuse me, you want to say all the time something?
No, I really don't. This is a good time for me to listen, because I have a good deal of self-sabotage that I do. Yeah. It gets in the way of...
I have this little process that gets the self-sabotage out of the way.
That doesn't surprise me, Lawrence, but go ahead.
Well, no, we've been talking about it for some weeks now.
Yeah.
And it's okay. There's a concept. First, well, before I go into that, I want to acknowledge what you've been saying. I agree with about the difference between art and technique. I once saw a film of Arthur Rubinstein, a biographical film, and he was talking about a case where a new student had come to him and was demonstrating his playing, and Rubinstein said to him, "You have very good technique. Now when are you going to make music?"
Right. I like that.
Yeah, and this happens often when we go in the levels of development, and when we are in the orange phase as a creative person, we want to to have that, and we don't think about the expression. We want to have the success, or we want to be perfect, or we want to.
Yeah. And the orange doesn't have the soul either of amber or of green.
No.
True.
Which is why America looks the way it does right now.
There, for instance,
that's why we have so many big box stores. They're just ugly as can be.
That's right. The commerce, they get the numbers, but they don't have the quality.
Yeah.
So it's foul.
To talk about singers who are, for instance, cholera tour singers, They are little notes and with a velocity incredible, and some of them really perfect, but they leave you without, you say, oh, great, you're really good, but you have no feeling. There's nothing coming. But it's really great. I mean, I would be happy to be able to do it in this way, but there is something missing when there is the focus only on one thing and not on the whole, in the integration of the whole being, I would say.
Yeah.
Lawrence, you said there is a nice process where we can do something against procrastination, or what was it? Self-sabotage. Did you think about that some people don't want to go out of self-sabotage?
Just a minute.
It's a comfortable place because, you don't have to dare to become something different or to begin something. I don't necessarily talk about you, but I think in many people feel that, and maybe me too.
I think these are
the greatness, the fear of greatness.
Yes.
That you could be successful. Oh God, and then
then what? who would I be? What would I have to do? Would I have to learn a whole bunch of new stuff? You know, what would people expect from me? How could I follow that up with anything?
Yeah,
Expectation.
that gets back to Ken Wilber's excellent distinction about self-consciousness. It's not self-consciousness. It's wrongly named. It is concerned with what other people are thinking about us. The
Yes.
attention is really on their opinion,
Yeah.
not on the self at all.
Mhm.
So their opinion, in this case, you fear the opinion of other people then?
Yeah.
Or what is it?
Well, if I were successful, then I would have to live up to these expectations. You know, I would have a public. I would have a following. There would be people waiting for my next blog. Whatever, you know, and I would have to perform. To be.
This is
Necessary.
this is funny because expectations, which I think in some way is even worse.
Okay, but this can be a horrible trap for people.
Yeah. We have talked too much. Let these people talk. We have about 5 to 10 minutes left.
Well, I did my share of listening today.
I talked too much.
Oh, well, maybe
I
so.
was so inspired by what we did in the afternoon with Scott and the two dancers. It was really great.
It was wonderful.
It was amazing, wasn't it? Yeah, it's just nice to be a part of a creative work. See, the thing is that earlier, you know, we were talking about different lines of development, and this conversation's turned into one that's been focused on creativity or the aesthetics in ourselves and each other. And one of the things that's important is that I'm interested in, creatively speaking, is that how can I take, it's the phrase is, who am I when nobody's looking? So the kind of self that I am, that's not trying to put on a show or is authentic or you know, with flaws or things like that. How can I make that self show up in the artwork or in my presentation or the expression of who it is that I truly am? So there's an air of no airs, that I'm not putting on airs or something like that. And I think that is important in the world today, because on Facebook you have a face, and you tend to be somebody else in social media, or you tend to be somebody that people envy or you tend to want to put on a show a little bit or something
You want to
like
look
this.
good.
You want to look good. You want to. When I scroll through my Facebook, I can see things. Well, I wish I was more like this or more like that. I think that social media, in terms of Facebook, is really designed with an algorithm that really thinks about that aspect of human behavior that wants more, wants to become something more. When there's a real creative power in dropping all that shit and the authenticity of the actual person, and being that in the public eye. That's an exciting thing.
Give up political correctness. Totally. Totally. Phony.
Isn't it a little bit what we are doing here? That show, and you neither, and if we're working together as friends here at home.
It's a little breaking up a little.
Is it frozen? No.
There you are.
Yeah.
Do you hear us? Okay.
Now, yep.
Okay. I probably, this was the universe who said I shouldn't say that.
What was it?
Maybe it was a lie. I was saying, isn't that what we are doing here? Because I don't think that I'm doing a big show here. I'm just talking with you and with Lawrence and with Mark, instead of, I cannot invite you here for having a coffee or beer with us. So we are in public. But it feels like, I don't do it for showing off, do I? I don't know. Was it me?
I don't think that's a big thing with you. No, it's a big thing with me, however. Anyway, speak for yourself.
Show. We're all show-offs.
Of course, we are show-offs. You know, let's not deny that. My
No, this
goodness.
is a part, but it is not the fundamental part. The fundamental part is really to talk about these things. And you know,
Yeah,
since
definitely.
I know Mark, it's the first time that I had somebody to talk about all these things. Before I didn't have anybody, and now the circle of people who we can talk together has become bigger and bigger, and that's what I really, really love.
Yes, and I have some really important Facebook friends with whom I, interact virtually daily, and that's important too. But they don't come over here into the Hangouts, And this is a separate little chunk of my life. And I wish we were more integrated, but they're not here. So here we are. Tonight.
We are here and we are going in a second. Shall we stop it here and decide what we want to do next time? What line can we talk about? I would like, maybe Lawrence, you are more familiar with this. I always get confused what cognitive line means. I thought it's only intellect, but I've understood that's not. So if we could talk about that a little bit next week.
Yeah, although it could be a one-liner. Just use the word recognition. Recognition.
Yeah, what you are aware of. That's what the cognitive line is about. What are you aware of? What do you notice? What can you see?
Yeah, and that's all dependent on memory.
Well, that's an interesting approach.
Let's think about it next week.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
I'm running off here, but I don't want at that point. We have done an hour, and I think it's enough.
All right.
If somebody ever watches it, they will have enough too. I'm quite sure.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe more than enough.
Okay, so I stop the broadcast, and we see you next week. Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Bye bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for stopping by.